All right, recording has started. Welcome to the study hall for May 2 of 2013. Today we're doing some more critical reasoning prompts that contain blanks. So we've seen an intro to this a little while ago. We had a session a couple of years ago, I think. It was around April of 2010 or 2011 where we looked at some problems containing blanks and discerned what the problem categories were for those. But we're going to be looking at these from a slightly different angle today, so be ready for it. All right, so the usual copyright notice. I got to type it out here. The problems today are from the gmatprep software, which is distributed by GMAT. So this is free software, which is what allows us to use it for these study halls. So all of the following problems are from the gmatprep software and are copyright GMAT. So these are free to distribute. It's free software. That's why we can also solicit these problems on the forum and so on, but they would at least like us to attach this copyright notice. So here's the copyright notice. Okay, the topic again is critical reasoning prompts with blanks. Let's take a look at one of those. Right here. Boom. Remember, guys, here's where you get the multiple choice answers. Please do not submit your multiple choice answers in the chat box. Here is a timer. That button. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, all right, we have about 12 non-responders at this point. So again, let me chide you a little bit. Again, please answer everything, including all the everythings, because it is how this test operates. So please do not be a non-responder. I'm looking at you if your name is Viral or Yogi or Methan, or Karen number 2, or Amit, or Ijana, or Femi. Okay, please answer the problem. Okay, here are your class statistics. That's not how I do that. Your class statistics are there. Okay. So we have there's no majority response, we do have a plurality response of B here. So, but let's take a look at this problem. And let's talk about this whole idea of having a blank in the prompt in general. So let's take that off the board and write some stuff. Okay, blanks in the prompt, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, let's solicit some general ideas here. Like, when you see a blank in the prompt, what do you think you want to do? Go ahead and type in the chat box if you have any general insights into this situation. What do you do when you see a blank in a prompt? Besides freak out, if any of you were going to say that. I suppose you could freak out. Okay, so a bunch of people have written stuff. Let me capture some of these ideas. Fill in the blank. Compute. I mean, fill in the blank. Yeah, okay. The complete the argument related to that blank. I mean, sure, okay, like these things that, if you say complete the argument or fill in the blank, I mean, of course that's not wrong, but it's sort of a circular argument. I mean, it's what we're saying, so here, let me put that on the board. Okay, if your response is something like this or like this, I mean, these are not wrong, but they are not super particularly helpful because it's basically just restating what you already know is the task, you know. It's kind of like saying, if I need to tie a pair of shoes, what do I do? Oh, well, you tie the shoes. I mean, great, but you have to already know how to do that. Otherwise, you are just repeating the known problem statement. So yes, these are correct, but I mean, these are just basically restatements of what is still an issue. So they're not wrong, but they're not additional insights. Someone is saying, read the argument, then guess what you think goes in there. And then, okay, interesting. So I'm actually not seeing from people what I think I would, and let me tell you what that is, and then we'll talk about whether that's a good or a bad thing that you aren't saying it. So let me take this stuff over to the next page. So we'll talk about that problem here in a second. And then here's a couple of things that you wrote. Someone wrote that. Someone wrote that. Someone wrote this. And then again, there are some things that people did not write, which is sort of a surprise to me, but we'll get there. So this second thing right here, I'm going to generalize this into basically figure out what kind of thing you're looking for. I mean, it's not always a premise or a conclusion. You know, it could be something else, but so more generally, get a handle on what kind of thing you want to find in general. Okay, so that's a thing. Someone said find the assumption, and then let me tell you what I usually get from tutoring students and whatnot when it comes to this sort of thing. And so again, I'm surprised that people are not saying this, but what people usually come up with is something like put the problem into a category. So like strengthen or weaken or whatever. And then try to answer it. Okay, so let's discuss. So you guys didn't say that, and let's talk about whether it's good that you didn't say that or bad that you didn't say that. So, because basically we have two different schools of thought here. Like we have the school of thought that roughly these two statements are from, which is, I guess there's three schools of thought. This school of thought here is basically, what is this? I mean, this is basically just if you intuitively understand the question. The task, then there's no need to bother with categories. Okay. I mean, if that's a misreading of what some of you wrote, then let me know, of course. But basically, that seems to be what's implicit in here. You know, if you because these responses are not going through the intermediate of categories. They're just saying, look, read the freaking blank, and if you understand what goes in it, good for you. I guess this here is sort of a third school of thought. This thing is right here. This seems to be, the thought process behind that one seems to be that you are always looking for the same thing every time. So, and I mean, let me tell you, I don't mean to be a heartbreaker here, but I will tell you that this is wrong. So let's get that one off the table right now. I mean, because you are totally not looking for certain things every single time. I mean, the problems with the blanks in them can be any critical reasoning task. And a lot of tasks involve mutually exclusive skill sets and totally different kinds of focus. Like in some of these problems, you have to basically prove that things are true or false. And in others, you would have to find random extra information that would support an argument. You know, like some of them are like draw the conclusion problems, so in which case, like if you get one that's like which of these conclusions is definitely true or false, then thinking about assumptions is a complete waste of your time, because it, you know, if you have to prove something true or false, then it has nothing whatsoever to do with assumptions. And we're going to see one of those today. On the other hand, you know, if you are looking for strengtheners or weakeners or whatever, then looking for an assumption may be a nice intermediate to get in. And then the other school of thought is what people didn't, I guess one person is saying that's kind of what they meant, but the other school of thought is that categorizing the task will help at first. So categorizing problems will help you solve them. Yeah, so what do you guys think? Purple or green? If you guys have any insights into that, just throw it. I mean, I know this might be like a flurry of responses, but go ahead and tell me in the chat box whether you are down with the purple school of thought or the green one. Okay. So it looks like I think we have a few more greens, but there's a lot of responses on both sides. Yeah, I like the way. All right, I'll tell you which group I cast my lot with here. I mean, I really like the way that Lent has written this. Lent didn't write that. I like the way Lent wrote this. This is exactly the point. The problem is that categories are not really, you know, the be-all and end-all of the world here. Like, this is absolutely precisely what the deal is. You need to be flexible. I mean, categories are at best approximations of all the tasks that you're going to face, but they're not necessarily, you know, not everything fits exactly into neat little boxes. So this is the deal here. I mean, more importantly, yeah, Joey Butch, absolutely, right? Why categorize if you know the task at hand? This basically ties in with what I'm about to say. Which is make sure you know what the goal is. The goal is not to get, I mean, you guys are not trying to develop artificial intelligence here. I mean, if you were, then you would have to categorize everything into categories, because if you were doing AI, it would be essential that you do that. You know, like because that's what AI would be. You would have to get literally everything to fit into some sort of category that you could then program. Not what we're doing here, guys. I mean, we are just human beings trying to solve the problems. And so the point is that this is the ultimate goal, right? So this purple thing gets it right. The ultimate goal is just to get it as it were. In other words, to have an intuitive understanding of what's going on. And if you have that understanding, then categorizing is unnecessary. And at best, it is at best unnecessary. It may even impede your efforts to solve the problem. And perhaps even detrimental. Because again, what if you get an interesting prompt? I mean, most prompts do fit into categories. Most of them do. But there are occasionally prompts that are difficult to categorize in whatever way because they're so specific. Like if you get a prompt that says, there are some prompts that are sort of halfway between being assumption prompts and being weakened prompts or whatever. And if you get exactly what it is, then good, just go for it. But if you do this intermediate step of trying to classify the problem, it may get in the way. So the point is, if you are lost or confused, then classifying can give you a rough idea. But it's a rough idea. So then let's address the point that Sri raises here then. Because this is a good point. And so let's address it. Because, the book does do this. This is very true. So this is a valid point. And so my first response is, yes, you're right. So how do we reconcile that with, or at least why? Why does the book do that? Does the book do that because the book sucks? No. But why does the book do that? Does anybody have any thoughts? Considering that that's not really the goal here. To sell more copies, well, depends on the market and what the market wants, but that's not really the fundamental reason. I mean, it does. I mean, Kyle says caters to beginners, but the problem is that no one is really a beginner in critical reasoning. I mean, there's a word for Kyle, there's a word for people who are beginners at critical reasoning, and let me tell you what that word is. That word is small children. I mean, if you are an adult human being, then by definition you are not a beginner at this kind of thing. And Rajiv, 1, 2, 3, I don't understand what that means. Maybe you could rephrase that. It works for the masses? Maybe. I mean, again, it's not the main deal. The pages we've covered so far. You can't really, unfortunately, if you're not a moderator, you can't page back and forth. But you can watch a recording when it comes out online, usually within a week or so. So let me tell you why. Yeah, Vince basically gets you. Lentz, I don't know if I would necessarily agree with that, because again, if you do take an intuitive approach, it might even be negative progress. But let's take a look at this. This is pretty much the deal. I mean, this sounds very simplistic, but this is basically the reason. In other words, yeah, the intuitive thing you can't really print on a piece of paper and put into a book. So this is what you guys have to keep in mind. I mean, what books can actually do is fundamentally limited. Don't forget this. So, we can't really print a book that says, hey, people, the goal is to have an intuition about this. Because is that the ultimate goal? Yes. Yes, that is the goal. The goal is to look at a problem and just kind of get it and just see what you are supposed to do as a thing. And only if you don't just look at it and understand what you're supposed to do, only in that case would it be ever even possibly helpful to classify the question. So, but again, in a printed book, we can't really do that. We have to print things that you can print on the pages and distribute to what one of our users here calls the masses. So that's why there's all this stuff about categories and so on, because we can, I mean, it's not totally unuseful information, because again, if you are lost, it is a thing that could possibly help you. But on the other hand, that is the kind of stuff that you can actually print in a book and distribute, whereas intuition is not. So keep this in mind. When you read a book, you are generally looking at the best that we could do in the form of a printed book, which is not necessarily optimal, and in some cases is far from optimal, but there's not a lot that can be done about it other than teach live. I mean, in other words, this is the reason why we still do things like teach live. If we could print everything in a book, there would be no need for that. So there it is. Okay. Back to the question at hand here. So again, the point here, the ultimate goal is to just understand what's going on. So now that we've talked about that, Vincent, I did make a remark at the beginning of this session that people have been saying that. That's going to be good for some types of thinkers and not as good for other types. Basically, it's good for the type of thinkers who just look at things and get an intuition. So here's what you should do. Like when you see a blank in the prompt, I mean, number one thing you should do is just see whether you know exactly what you are looking for without having to categorize the problem. So flowchart style, yeah, is this a yes or a no? Like if this is a yes, then just solve the problem. So then just look for the thing that you know you're looking for. If this is a yes, then go find what you want. If this is a no, then you would move on to possibly trying to categorize the problem. So if this is a no, then think about stuff like categories, which might then be helpful in orienting you to the problem at hand. So if you don't intuitively understand the task, then think about stuff like categories. So this is the point, and I mean, because this is also how our brains work. That's the other insight that you're going to want here. Because when people are having conversations, I mean, conversations involve a lot of critical reasoning. And when people have conversations, ladies and gentlemen, they do not classify each other's questions before answering them. You know, like let's say, okay, I have a friend who's thinking about moving to Texas for work. And if someone's like, you know what, I don't think that's such a great idea because ... I mean, at that point, we already know exactly what the person is going to be looking for. They're going to be looking for a specific reason why moving to Texas for work is a bad idea. I mean, notice that classifying that is not going to help anybody. Like, you could say, okay, well, this is a weakener type of situation, but really, that's inferior to having the understanding that, look, dude, we want a reason why moving to Texas for work is not great. So, same sort of thing, let's apply that to here. Scientists do on the whole, typically, whatever, scientists do their most creative work before they're 40. That means I don't have too much creativity left. How sad. A tendency that has been taken to show that aging carries with it a loss of creative capacity. So this means, you know, most scientists do their creative work when they are relatively young. So some people have floated the idea that means that getting older inevitably means less creativity. On the other hand, another explanation that people have floated is that they've just been in the field too long and they've sort of ossified in terms of their thought processes. In other words, they've run out of, there's like a critical clock of time to be creative when you are relatively new to the field. And so that clock has run out. So, and then supporting this explanation is the finding that. So what are we looking for here? We're looking for a thing that does what? I mean, again, don't give me a broad category here. See if you can give me exactly what we are looking for in the chat box. I'll see if you can give me more specific than that. Yeah, right. Well, 1, 2, 3, not quite, because that's the thing we're trying to explain, but that's not one of the explanations. Yeah, lens, there it is, right? It supports the hypothesis that the loss of creativity comes from working for 15 or more years instead of the age itself. This is precisely what you are doing. And if you have this understanding, like notice this is just a literal reading of the passage. Like Lentz is not being some incredible genius here. Lentz is just reading the words that are in front of him and thinking about them in a normal sort of conversational point of view. I mean, again, okay, most of the other things in the chat box are unnecessarily general, is the point I'm trying to make. I mean, maybe you guys are writing that way because you didn't really know, or you couldn't find the words to be more specific. If that's the case, then okay. But if you are actually thinking in terms like this, so again, it depends on what was in your head while you wrote. If people who wrote stuff like this. If you had the specifics in your head, and we're just writing this as like shorthand, then good. That's the point. On the other hand, if you are actually thinking in terms of generalities like this, then not so good. Because then you are, if you are, what you're doing is you are imposing an unnecessary detour between you and the solution. Like when you read this, you want to do what Lentz is doing and just say, dude, this is what I want. In fact, what's cool here is that these questions, the questions with the blank you should actually like, because they involve one less step than all of the other questions do. Meaning if I have a problem that says, like, which of the following weakens the counter argument above, I gotta do a couple of things, right? First I have to translate the counter argument above into specifics, and then I have to answer the specific question. What's nice about this is that I don't have to do that intermediate step. Like if you do what Lentz is doing here, you don't have to bother with the intermediate. You don't have to translate anything. It's right there in front of your face. You just have to use it. So an alternative explanation is that by age 40, so like this explanation is what you want to support, and that's the thing you want to support. So that's what Lentz did. He's just like, dude, look, that's what I want, and I don't want not that. So, boom. There you go. So what exactly are we looking for here? That's what we are looking for here. So let me move these things to the next page. Some of them not. And then, oh, that didn't work. Okay, forget about it. All right, so I'm just going to kill these things down here so we have room to write. Okay, yeah, we want to support the idea that it's the fact that you have been working in the field too long instead of the fact that you are older. So, well, choice A doesn't really support either idea because choice A goes against everything that we are talking about. I mean, choice A indicates that at least some people over 40 are the ones doing the creative research. And then there's also the problem that research grants are not super closely related to creativity. B, well, a disproportionately large number of scientists who do produce highly creative work beyond age 40. What is significant about these guys? Tell me a story about those people, the people who are underlined currently in red and about to be underlined in purple. Yeah, they are creative, that's true, but that's not they're the exception to the rule. That's what we want here, right? So the point is those are the people who break the trend. And there's this common thread among them, according to choice B. Choice B says that the trend breakers, in other words, the scientists who are creative after 40, are predominantly those who have not been in the field for a long time. So this totally supports that idea. And what's nice is that in the problems with blanks, you can just do that. And you don't even have to go through these frustrating intermediate steps of translating words like assumption and premise and blah, 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 blah. You don't have to go there at all. You can just answer the question that is in front of you as if you were having a conversation. So this is the answer we want. And you can do that directly, which is a very nice thing to be able to do. C, many scientists temper their own expectations by their beliefs. So what this means is that it's like a self-defeating prophecy thing, like where I don't understand what you are asking here, but my response to that question is just about everybody does. Okay, back to the topic at hand. You can't see the text on the whiteboard. Then Ria, if you just logged in, then might take a second to load, but otherwise, yeah. Okay. Many scientists, C says that people are telling themselves that they will become less creative as they get older, and so that contributes. If that's true, then that would be a third explanation for this that would actually work against either of those two. So that's not what we want. And then D, that's actually another explanation. I mean, that would be another explanation that is different from either of these. D is they're less creative because they just don't care as much about doing creative research. So that would work against both explanations up here. And then E, we don't care because we are only concerned with scientists and not general people who are creative. And even if there were a strong connection there, E doesn't help to resolve the issue between these two things. Because even with poets and musicians, you could have both explanations. You could have maybe musicians are naturally less creative after 40, but also maybe musicians who have been musicians for too long are not creative anymore. So we want B. Notice your goal here is to just know what you are looking for when you read the prompt. The goal is not necessarily to classify. I mean, if you were to classify this, you would be looking for a strengthener, but again, you don't really have to go there. That's what's so cool. I mean, my goal here in this session is to get you guys to realize that in a very real sense, the problems with blanks in them are easier than the problems that don't have blanks, because they are a lot more like real human conversation, where you don't really have to bother with that step unless you are confused. Okay. There we go. Any questions? If not, we'll move on to another problem here. Let's say, how can I tell that? Have not been working for as long because they entered their field at a later age, which if you start later, then that means that you, by definition, have been doing it for that many fewer years. Okay. If that answers your question, good. If not, then depends on what you mean by out of scope, right? Because if out of scope means outside what we have currently talked about, then the answer you want is out of scope too. Because remember, you need more evidence. So I would not worry about this whole out of scope thing, because the problem is that a lot of the answers you want are going to be out of scope too. Meaning, whenever you want additional support for anything, it by definition will come from outside the current available evidence. That's the whole point. I mean, if we stayed in the box here, so to speak, then we could not support or unsupport. So Maria, I just answered that question out loud, but if you had to, you could call this a strengthening question. But you don't have to. That's really my main point of this whole session, is that you do not have to do that. But if you were to do that, if you were confused enough to justify doing that, this would be a strengthening question. Okay, let's do another one. How about this? Again, with multiple choice questions, please get your answers in the polling part and not in the chat. Please do not chat your answer. This is a shorter problem. Shorter means less time. So I'll put a little bit less than 2 minutes in the timer. There you go. Okay. Again, please answer the problem. Please don't not answer the problem. This is the GMAT. The GMAT is a test on which you have to answer the problems. So please do. All right, so we got some more answers there. Here are your responses. So let's take a look. There you go. Okay, so we are kind of all over the place on this one. we had a few non-responders, one of whom is me, but if you are a non-responder, do keep in mind that you can't be one on the real test. Okay, so let me import some of this thought process from the other page. When you see a blank in the prompt, what is the goal? All right, so here's the insight from the other page. When you see a blank in the prompt, the goal is to see whether you know exactly what you are looking for without having to categorize. So let's go for that. In the chat box, what are we trying to do here? What are we actually doing? What's the goal specifically? Yeah, it's not a reason for a discrepancy. That is not what it is. It's more like what Rajiv and Viral are saying, which is you have to find something that is not possible if those other two things are things. Jenny, I don't really know what that means. Yeah, you have to find something that is contradicted by those other two statements. And again, see, classifying this problem is going to be weird because our typical classification categories don't really cover this task. So I forget who it was who originally stated that you had to like find assumptions every time, but if you, let me scroll back up real quick. Vince said you got to find the assumption. If you're looking for any kind of assumption in this problem, then you are totally just wasting your time because that's not what you're doing here at all. Like, let's look at what we are doing here. Well, if again, see, my goal here is to get you to like these more than the ones without blanks because this is like a conversation, people. If both of those things are accurate, then hey, they must be wrong about blah, 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 blah. So what are we doing here? The question is still on the board. 6711, the question is there. It is taking up the top half of the board. So if both of those are accurate, then the report must be wrong if it says blah. There it is. That's what you want to find. There's no need for a category there. So we want something that must be wrong if the other two statements are things. That's what we want. I mean, if you had to put this into a box, if someone put a gun to your head and said classify this category or die, then you would probably say it is most like the, draw the conclusion problems, except it's kind of a draw the anti-conclusion problem. It's specifically find something that's false. But you don't have to, people. You can just, you just got to understand the task. There's the task. Okay. Well, let's look, right? So what do we have? Well, we know that there are more people in Springfield overall. I mean, if you understand this, then this problem is not so bad. I mean, you'll see that it isn't. It's definitely not a problem of deep thought. So, okay. Well, in total, the first fact is, in total, you got more people in S than in H-town. This is called S-town and H-town. The second fact is that more tourists stay in the single largest hotel in H-town. So the single largest hotel in H-town has more tourists than the Royal Arms, which is in S-town. Okay, those are our two facts. Well, I mean, let's see if we can link these up before we start exploring answer choices. You know, if you can get a sense of what, I mean, you're looking for something that must be wrong. So if we can get a sense of what must be true, then that'll help us here, because then we can just pick things that are the opposites of the things that we know. So notice that we need to have more people overall in S-town. But there is a place in S-town that doesn't have as many people as a place in H-town. So what do we know for sure? Meaning, like, let's flip this statement around into, you know, the Royal Arms. Royal Arms by itself doesn't have as many people as this other H-town hotel does. By itself, the Royal Arms has fewer tourists than the #1 hotel in H-town. What does that mean? Definitely has to be true. Because remember, you need an aggregate. You need to have more people in this town. So what does that mean that we know? It means that there's other. It means there's definitely people staying in other parts of S-town, because we have to achieve this. So that means there have to be other places for these people to stay. So to make this other thing true, the presence of other hotels in S-town is absolutely necessary. Because if not, you know, if the Royal Arms is the only game in town, then that means that you can actually find one hotel in H-town that literally had more people than everybody in Springfield. So that means that E is the thing that is impossible. So yes, this is from GMAT. Okay. As far as the other things, those don't have to be wrong. I mean, the average time that people stay, we don't really care how long they stay. We're just talking about numbers of people, so we don't, introducing this extra variable is not really a thing. B, there's only one hotel in H-town that's larger than that. Well, okay. I mean, but if that one hotel has this, then we still have the problem that we have here. So, I mean, this could be true. C, more tourists stay in hotels in Harristown than stay in the Royal Arms. I mean, not only does this not have to be wrong, but this is actually definitively true. Because we already know that you can find one hotel that actually contains more people than the Royal Arms. So if you have one hotel that contains more people, then of course if you added them all up, then they would have even more people. So C is not only not the answer we want, but C must be true. So C is the opposite. When someone is quoting Cassidy in the chat box. So you know your late 90s hip hop, good for you. Okay, maybe early 2000s. Yeah. Okay. D, the Royal Arms is the largest hotel in Springfield. That doesn't have to be false. I mean, there could certainly be bigger hotels in town. In fact, if there were bigger hotels, it would help this thing be true. All right, any questions? Go ahead and chat them. I don't see anybody typing anything in the box. I'm going to go on the idea that we don't need to keep discussing. So let's do another question here. Kyle's typing something. So hotels plural ... matter. I don't know what you are asking me, Kyle. Are you? Yeah, this would be like the total people who stay in all of those hotels, which means, you know, that's a greater number than this one hotel. So, oh yeah, in the passage, yeah, that means aggregate total. I mean, more tourists stay in hotels in this town, meaning all of them. All the people staying in all the hotels in S-town or in H-town. That's how you know that we're talking about aggregates here. I mean, most importantly, hey, since it's plural is Quizzy is right. Maybe if that's not really the kind of thinking that you want here, because let's just say that's the kind of nitpicking that will generally work against you in most problems, because this is a rather unusual task. Like it's not normal to have the task of having to prove or disprove things. So maybe, sure, that might help you here. I mean, it's not really what that is. That's really just language that you would have to use to write these things in English. But as an artifact of that language, you might be able to get that clue. That's perceptive. Although when you deal with like strengthening and weakening stuff, thinking like that is going to get in your way, because if you're nitpicking everything, then you're going to not see larger themes and issues and stuff. So, I mean, that's a nice bit of intellectual microsurgery there. Definitely not something that I would be capable of, but on the problems that are testing larger, connections, that's going to not necessarily be your friend. D is wrong because there could definitely be lots of bigger places in S-town. So but then again, maybe there aren't. We don't know. I mean, S-town could be full of small hotels, and this could still be a thing. Okay, let's look at another one. How about that one? Let me clear out your answers. Give you a timer. There's a timer. And remember where the multiple choice answers are. They are there underneath your name. yeah, I kind of forgot to activate the microphone. Thank you. It happens, these things. All right, so the majority answer was A. So let's take a look at the task. Again, my main goal in this session is to get you guys on board with this idea that you want to just go direct if possible. When you see a blank, that's your friend. It means you can read the prompt and just do more or less exactly what the prompt says. So someone is really into the hip hop thing here. 50 Cent. I'll take you to the candy shop. All right, so what are we doing in this problem? Well, yeah, what are we doing? This, thank you. The result, all right, so what we're saying here is they surveyed people coming out of this grocery store called Food Basket, and they were like, hey, people coming out of Food Basket, what did you buy? And then they compared them against Shopper King, and they found out that, you know, these shoppers must be such geniuses because, yes, indeed, they were cheaper at Food Basket. So the stuff people bought, so they investigated, they looked at the stuff people bought at Food Basket. Sure enough, those things were cheaper at Food Basket than at a competing store. But what are we looking for? Well, we're looking for a reason why that may not indicate an overall savings in general at Food Basket. I mean, again, see, this kind of problem, if you tried to go the classifying route here, you're going to have to do a lot of acrobatics that you don't really have to do. Because, I mean, if you were going to classify this, I guess it's a weaken problem, but you would have to construct the argument that you would have to weaken. Because there's not even, like, really an argument here. I mean, you would have to actually make it into, okay, the argument is that shoppers will save more money overall, and then you're weakening that. I mean, that's a lot of steps that you don't have to do if you just read the prompt. Read it, know it, love it. So just do what it says. This result does not necessarily show that shoppers at Food Basket would save money overall. So in other words, we want some disconnect between the stuff they bought at Food Basket and all the stuff. So, because the stuff they bought is definitely cheaper. So if that was a thing, then this would be an absolutely unassailable logical connection here. But, you know, maybe not, right? So we need a reason why. In order to break that idea, I mean, we need a reason why the stuff people bought at Food Basket may not represent all the stuff. That's how you would do this. So, yeah, some things are different, right? And we know the customers themselves are not the difference because it does say that customers were chosen at random. So it's not going to be a demographic difference in shoppers. So that means it's got to be something about the selection of items chosen. So if you look at choice A, that's what we want here, right? This means that this means that people specifically choose a store because they have particular items in mind. And so they don't necessarily go to the store where things are cheaper overall, but they go to the store where the stuff they buy costs less. So, I mean, if this is still too abstract, I mean, the best way to make this more understandable is to personalize it and make it square with your own experience. Like, this is totally a thing with me when I shop for groceries. Like, there's a store that I go to called Trader Joe's. If you're not from the U.S., you might not know that store, but Trader Joe's has much cheaper prices on some things like ground beef, but on average, most things at Trader Joe's are more expensive. So, but if you caught me coming out of Trader Joe's, you would see me with bags full of things like ground beef and cottage cheese, which are the things that cost less there at Trader Joe's. Does that mean I would save money if I bought all my groceries at Trader Joe's? Absolutely no, it would not. But the things that I buy there are the things that cost less there at that store. So that's what's going on here, right? You have people who are smart shoppers and are specifically buying the things that cost less at this store. So that's the answer we want. The other choice is for shoppers with more than 20 items, the shopper king totals were even more than 5% higher. I mean, B is definitely not a thing that would go against this idea. In fact, B seems to suggest that the more stuff people buy, the more savings they would have. So B would actually reinforce this idea. Like B is a wrong way answer. It's exactly the opposite of what we want. C, many shoppers consider factors other than price. Well, that's nice, but we are only concerned with whether they would save money. So even if they also consider, how close is this store to my house or other non-money related things, that doesn't influence the money decision. D, well, I mean, if anything, D, if there's any degree of consistency here, then that would, if anything, help this case and not hurt it. Like if they buy the same stuff or the same amount of stuff, it stands to reason that they would save money by doing exactly what they're doing. And then we don't care if they work at Food Basket. They were chosen at random, so that takes care of things like this, because random is random. So if a couple of them happen to be employees, then, well, they were random people. I was thinking of C from the organic and health point. Well, Rajiv, okay. I mean, you can't manufacture connections that are that tenuous, so to speak. Because that's not even necessarily a connection. I mean, there does not, you can't make up organic produce. I mean, first of all, organic produce is not even mentioned here, so that's made up. And then second of all, you're going from there to health. I mean, that's a questionable connection anyway. In fact, organic fruits and stuff are more likely to make you sick because they don't kill all the pests and stuff. And thirdly, you're going from that to healthcare costs. I mean, there are just all kinds of things that you are making up there that are random. A general guideline for something like that, if your reasoning is, oh, this might have to do with this other thing, which then maybe would be connected sort of to this thing that might have to do with this other thing, that's wrong. Do not take it. There has to be a direct connection. So if you find yourself doing, mental gymnastics, that means the choice that you are looking at is wrong. That doesn't mean you have to go through an incredible chain of reasoning. It means it's wrong. That's nice. The connections are direct. All right, we might have time to throw one more up there, so let's do it. Let's find one more here. How about that? All right, you know where the multiple choice answers are, boys and girls. They are underneath your name. Please use the choices that are underneath your name. You know the drill. Okay, mastodons. Have fun. I think I forgot to give you a timer. So here's a timer. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I think we have mostly responded. And we're starting to push the time here, so let's go ahead and put your answers on the board. Here are your responses. I mean, I think we're pretty good on this one, but let's just discuss. All right, so yeah, these considerations may help settle whether. I mean, so let's figure out what they're saying here. When species are hunted a lot, notice the connections when you read through this stuff. So extensively hunted goes with this, whereas this idea here goes, this is verbatim the same as that. So that's an easy connection to recognize. So the deal is that extensive hunting goes with a larger percent of reproductively mature, or like basically fast-growing individuals, is what that means in simpler terms. Whereas when there's less food around, that goes with the idea of the opposite. There's your correlation. So then those things, what we're looking for is that in the case of mastodons, these ideas can help settle that issue. Since what? So we need a reason why. I mean, according to the prompt says we are looking for a reason why that difference will be useful in, you know, narrowing down what happened to mastodons in particular. So in other words, okay, we know there's a difference. There's a difference that we are absolutely aware of here, which is that when there's a lot of hunting going on, you generally see more of these early maturing individuals. Whereas when there's a food shortage, you see less of that. You see more people who, or not people, you see more specimens that grew more slowly. And then the passage is saying that that difference will be a thing that will help us resolve this quandary. So, well, what does that mean? Like, if that difference is going to be useful, that means that we have to be able to use it. because otherwise we're just theorizing. I mean, what would make that a useful difference? It would be a useful difference if there is actually evidence out there that we can use it on. So, like, in other words, for this difference to be useful, to actually be useful in settling the issue, as opposed to just being like a cute fact about animal demographics. We need actual evidence about what? Tell me in the chat box. Yeah, we need, in other words, we need some sort of actual hard evidence of when mastodons reach maturity. Because if we don't have that, then this is just a cute fact that we can't apply. So, about when mastodons matured, how fast they did that. So that's what we're looking for. We're looking for some connection there. Again, you would have to do a lot of twisting and turning into unnecessary contortions to get this to fit into a category. But the good news is you don't have to get it to fit into a category. You just have to understand what your thing is. I mean, we're talking about using the difference in maturity rates to settle an issue. So that means that we definitely need to know what those maturity rates were through some kind of evidence. So that's what B is. That thing that we need to know can be established. I mean, we don't care that it's from mastodon tusks. The fact that it's tusks as opposed to other things is not really a thing, as long as there is something. It could be mastodon tusks, it could be other fossils, it could be magical revelations from the gods, it could be ancient scrolls of writing that talked about how long mastodons took to grow, well, whatever it is. As long as we have some way of finding that out, we are good. Then we can use that idea. So that's what we want. And again, you can do this directly. I mean, these problems, again, hopefully I have at least begun to convince you these problems are your friends. They're not the enemy. Like when there's a blank in the passage, it becomes conversational. It becomes, you can just turn this into a normal interchange of ideas. And then look for basically exactly what it says to look for. So as far as the other choices are concerned, from the location of hunting weapons, it's possible to determine whether they were used to hunt mastodons versus like doing other things with them. That's not going to help us. So, because A would help us determine the purpose of the weapons that were found, but we don't care. When mastodons became extinct is not the issue. The issue is how fast did they reach reproductive maturity. And again, what's neat here is you don't even have to know what reproductive maturity means. I mean, you could replace this with absolutely any idea in the world, and this would not really matter as long as it's the connection that you're seeking here. It's not the meaning of individual things. So in case the English is not really the issue here, because you don't care what reproductive maturity means. You just care that that is the same as that, which is the same as that. That's the point. I mean, as long as these are the same idea, that's what we care about. I mean, you could actually replace this with their Sweet 16 or their quinceañera or whatever. It doesn't make any difference. I mean, individuals that, graduated from high school earlier. I mean, mastodons didn't go to high school, presumably, but if you did that, this problem would still work. Like when there's a lot of hunting, the mastodons that graduated from high school early would be more. When there's less food, they take longer to graduate from high school. And so then, well, then we would need to know when the mastodons graduated from high school. Hey, how about that? That's choice B. The word individuals refers to individuals of any species. So, yeah. All right. But yeah, if you want to replace that with graduating from high school, then you can feel free and it will still work. Whether male and female mastodons reach at the same age doesn't make any difference because it's the overall speed with which they did that we care about, not the difference in sexes. And then finally, whether the human houses built from mastodon remains are from an earlier time period, that's not going to help us establish this difference because it's not a relevant thingy. And there it is. Okay, we need to wrap up here pretty soon. We're a few minutes over time, so thank you. I think that there's a few more of these that we've collected for this session, so I think we're going to spill into the next session, so I think we're going to do some more of these. So we're going to do more of these thingies with blanks in them. So that'll be the topic for the next session as well, which is in 2 weeks. And then I believe after the 2-week point, I think there's a 3-week hiatus. You should check the schedule to make sure, but the Memorial Day week we're not doing it. Yeah, Ginny, I don't remember which one was the second question. If you could tell me what the material of that question was. Like, what was it about? What kind of stuff was in it? Scientist. Let's see. The operative word here is quick. We do have to shut this down here in about 2 or 3 minutes. So be fast, please. The number of the question, I don't understand what you mean by the number of the question. I don't know what you are saying. Unfortunately, I don't understand that statement. You are assuming that they are not older people on the field. I don't know what you're saying, unfortunately. So, I find these fill in the blanks somewhat confusing. Are they as hard as? That's not a thing. That's an individual thing. It depends on who you are. Meaning, it's the type of thinking involved. I mean, Janie, if you could try to rephrase your question, I could take a crack at it. It depends on the type of thinking, right? Like, I am not really a nitpicker type of thinker. So for me, questions like this are harder. Like this one here about Springfield and stuff, because I'm not like a super mathematical kind of thinker. I mean, I'm more of a big picture, see the connections type of guy. So for me personally, all problems like this one are harder than all problems about like strengthening and weakening and whatnot. Whereas for people who are very like precise and mathematical thinkers who nitpick things, it would be the opposite. So yeah. So I mean, there's no such thing as harder or easier on a general level. I mean, it's an individual judgment. So they feel that less. Okay. They're not in the book, Carmela. They're from the software. They're from the free GMAT prep software distributed by GMAT. I'm assuming that the people are not older. I mean, they are controlling for that. I mean, we're looking at the people who do creative work after 40 versus most scientists who don't. So the age factor is taken into account here. Like that is implicit in the way this is written. In fact, it's explicit. So it's not an issue of exactly how old are they. It's an issue of whether they do the creative work before or after 40. So these are the people who do the creative work after they are 40. And so they are the people who are not this, is the point. So we don't need to establish exactly how old they are, because the point is that we know for sure that they did their creative work at an unusually old age, and so that's why we are interested in that. I hope that helps. I do have to run, so I'm going to close this session, and good night and good luck. I'm going to log you guys out here in about 20 or 30 seconds. I'll see you in 2 weeks.